Hey everybody. Before we get into the video today, I wanted to tell you all about a channel I feel many of you will enjoy. I myself personally love urban exploration. It's actually been a hobby of mine for years. Exploring abandoned areas left to time is fascinating to me. Seeing buildings that were once filled with hundreds of people, now home to nature and silence. This video is actually sponsored by the Modern Frontiersmen. They are a group of independent documentarians dedicated to showing the then and now of the world. They explore dangerous and forgotten places and seek knowledge everywhere they go. So, if you like urban exploration, history, and adventure, then you will definitely want to check out their channel. Here is just a taste of what they have to offer. Again, be so kind as to swing by their channel after this video for some content you will definitely not want to miss. Seriously, I have watched countless videos of theirs, and I have gotten sucked into seeing through their eyes things that I would love to experience. Now, on to the video. I found this note, nailed onto a tree on my front lawn. I don't really know how to describe it. Here, I'll just let you read it for yourself. I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me though. You hardly ever do these days. Your skin looks so nice and healthy. And your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen. You've grown so much. I remember the day I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting at my desk, head down, listening to the teacher shout out names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognize, and a stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student, I wondered? The teacher didn't pause for a second. Just confirmed calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice came from. I saw you, a pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at a seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies flying around you, flickering, dozens of them, never straying too far away from you. I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin like you were a mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost? No one else seemed to even acknowledge the new stranger sitting at the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour had passed as I waited for something to happen, for someone to notice you, for you to leave, for you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like I was in a horror story that I was certain I was in. But nothing happened. Teachers came and went, my classmates laughed and slept, and you just sat there. The bell rung for recess. The other kids ran off for the day, leaving me and you together in an empty classroom. You stood up and pulled a chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. "Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your question." I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. It probably would have turned out better for me in the long run, but let's not speculate. I guess at that point in my life, I was pretty lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd actually eat me, and the other 50 was that someone actually wanted to talk to me. Kid priorities don't make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk, sat down on the chair you pulled in for me, and asked my question. What were you? You said that once you were a child, just like me, parents and friends, you used to go to the same school as me. Then one day, one ordinary day, when you were 10, you just woke up and you were like this, covered in fireflies, and no one could remember you the moment they concentrated on anything else. No one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd notice you every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years, and how I forgot the instant I walked out of the room. How everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you'd been alone. Your story was very hard to believe. So I didn't. I asked what the reality prank show I was on. You looked unimpressed and asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard by this. Then you said the last time I was here, I was telling you a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps began to prickle my skin. It was a story I had been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone. At that moment, a million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you. And so I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask me if my mother had recovered from her sickness. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed at the fact that I shared this private matter to a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go. Your steadiness, though, it took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate, like you'd already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid, and I was probably on the onset of a crush. So you can excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors, pressed it against my arm's skin, and I dug in. As it drew blood, I pushed it forwards till the cuts formed the shape I wanted. Letter by letter, I carved your name onto my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong, kid power might have made me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But even then as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that. The confusion, how strange it was for you that anyone would want to remember. I remember the look so clearly. When I woke up the next day and I saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said that no one had ever done anything like that before, and suggested I might actually have a mental illness. I won't deny it. It drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came into my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember you? That night, I was sitting up on my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should cover it up so I couldn't see it, and give you back your privacy, when all of a sudden I heard a crash. I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered and a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out the cracked window to see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside, yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice made you quite a bit rusty, but that was all right. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent the most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You tell me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed the food going missing, never noticed the extra room, and never noticed that you'd stolen the extra key. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think that you were a part of my imagination. Fight Club style, you know? After all, what could you do to me that I couldn't do to myself? You spent the next month or so trying to leave bite marks on my ear or neck to prove a point. I still have some on my ear, actually, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get worse and worse, paler and paler, and you'd rub your eyes raw. I remember it was in winter when we had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, I brushed my teeth, and I started searching for clothes to wear. It was a winter morning and my room was so dark, and I didn't even see your name on my arm. The cold sent shivers through my body, and I pulled out a long-sleeve jacket. And a small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah. And why did I? I finished tidying up and headed out to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I'd been worrying about had just disappeared. I walked up the school stairs, down the hall, through my class door, and sat down on my desk. The same feeling of a burden forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I didn't move. I just sat at my desk thinking, while my other classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out to join them when I heard it. It was something small in the wind, like a whisper. But it continued on and on. It sounded actually like my name. I knew this was strange, but at the same time I knew that this was worth my attention. I felt oddly calm. Everything would be all right. Everything would be just fine. Just ignore it. I sat there at my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices, when I felt a force tugging on my sleeve. The moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open and I saw your name on my arm, and then your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You'd been yelling at me for over 20 minutes, and I think that was the moment we realized how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from completely forgetting. From there, we spent most of the next year in the town library together, trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me, because my mother's treatment, my family couldn't afford to go on any trips, and our house didn't have heating anymore, so I was happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in and of itself. After all, how would I read about people that I couldn't remember? And how would you find out who was special when no one could even remember enough about them to record them? We found an old family tree and records. Individually, we'd write down the name of everyone in the book on 2 lists. and then we would compare them. The names I hadn't remembered to write down, but you had, would become the focus. They were the names of people who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books we thought could help us because they were written by or were about the people we were searching for. I'd read the books with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You'd surf the internet on the library computers for articles about these people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse we got of what was really happening to you. It was a late night when you found the picture. I was a bit drowsy by that time and almost about to nod off when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up, pointing at the screen. I didn't see anything. Well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you'd marked out two names, Susie Appleby Reagan, 13, and Terry Appleby Reagan, 12. Siblings. For a moment, I saw the paper and the screen side by side, and then I saw them. Two figures emerging from the woods towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, but all 5 limbs stretched into nightmarish proportions. Blank white skin that looked to be more like tree bark than anything I'd ever seen. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. The shorter one looked emaciated, I remember. I could see their rib cages, and I remember seeing their eyes. God, their eyes. They were so small. They were so red. The longer one, with the white hair, it didn't even look alive anymore. They were just skin, wrapped around skeletons. Their empty eye sockets had fireflies swarming out of them, and they were both reaching for the cameraman. It was a blog post by a hiker, 20 years after the 2 kids had been written about last. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He'd been wanting to go to those woods for a while now anyway, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture had actually just appeared on his camera one day out of the blue. For a moment, I looked at your face, your thin, pale face with those red, veined eyes. Would that be you? When my scar faded? Just a walking horror I'd glimpse, then forget? Starting from that moment, we worked through our reading at a much faster pace. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we'd left untouched promised hope. The books we finished and tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods is your future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list before I stumbled across that journal. God, that horrible, horrible journal. The journal used to belong to a mental patient named Joey, who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until the flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre and disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favorite were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. But a thing like this, it belongs in the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. It's sufficient enough to know that these things, they weren't fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, any kid, anyone he'd like. He could take them at any time, the dead of night in their own homes, or in broad daylight on their front yards. It didn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house and drag them into a room. Usually by then an Amber Alert was issued, but he didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon enough. He'd drag them to a special room in his house. Here the fireflies would come and latch onto them. Now nobody was searching for these kids. Not the police, not the parents, nobody. From then on, he could do whatever he wanted to the kid. He'd get bored of them after a while, usually a day or two. after the child had broken. And then the kid would go away too. Hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with bugs. I guess he got bored of that too one day, so one day he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not out of guilt. No, he just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. The sick fuck. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing kids. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host, just in a dormant state. When a child, he'd usually specify the age, would approach the swarm, it would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into the things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say the world owed him nothing. But that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out on the final page. On the final page was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face at that moment. You asked if I had found anything. And I said no, and I closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down your computer, you picked up the last book, and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was all right, and that I could go home. We would talk about it in the morning. I stood up, and I walked past the shelves of books. I headed for the library entrance, but I stopped right outside of the door and waited. I waited until I heard the sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table, where you were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands. I sat back down. As you raised your eyes to me, you said you wish you'd never met me. How happy you were when you had nothing to lose. How I ruined your life. You'd never really gotten better at talking to people. That was the worst love confession I'd ever heard. I remember how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember that kiss. I wish it could have just been a kiss. I'm sorry that I ruined the moment. When my arms were around you, I was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the firefly in my hand. I remember how it struggled, until it didn't anymore, until it was a part of me. The fireflies shifted. They came over to me, and they left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes, the confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserved to be loved. You deserved to know that. I wasn't really living anyway. You reached for me, and I pulled away, as the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes. And then you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now, so many people at your birthday party. You also look so much healthier. I haven't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten a lot paler. My eyes hurt all the time now. I couldn't go to school like you did all those years. I haven't wasted my time though. I found Joey's pit. The bodies. There were so many bodies. There's a grave for those children now. Without me, my mom could afford her surgery. She looked so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you crying yesterday. You were with your friends laughing. For a brief moment, your eyes met mine, and then they were so wet. I think I'm gonna go away. For good. You're not gonna be happy if I stick around. And I'm so happy that I met you. Even if you don't remember me. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes. I feel so lonely, even with my friends. I don't know what's going through my head during these times. And sometimes I'd end up in a bathtub, a knife in my hands, and my wrist bleeding. Up till now, I thought I was cutting my wrist, but I wasn't. The cuts, they're letters. I've been carving a name onto my arm.